I, 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 I got a letter from the government the other day. I opened and read it and burned that. Man, the way that I live don't concern that. Man, we gon' have to settle this another.
Welcome to another edition of Critical Insight on Your World News. I'm your host, Solomon Kamajan. And today, it's my honor to have as our featured guest, Dr. Jahi Issa, who is going to be talking about some very, very important things, ranging from what has been going on with HBCUs, how he himself was targeted for being a progressive African scholar at Delaware State, and we're also going to be talking about some lynchings that have been going on in Delaware that he also was at the forefront in terms of covering and speaking out against these lynchings of black men and trying to stop them. So, Dr. Issa, thank you so much for coming on Your World News on Critical Insights.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to dialoguing with you now and in the future.
Definitely. Well, in terms of the point of departure I want to take with this interview, there was a really important piece that you wrote back in September of 2011 that was featured on Black Agenda Report, and the name of that piece was called "The Ethnic Cleansing of Historically Black Colleges and Universities in the Age of Obama." I'd like to start off with how you started off within that article, where you gave an overview of the derivation of HBCUs, why and how they were created. For folks that probably didn't read that article, can you tell us the history of HBCUs, how and why they were created in the first place?
Yes. Well, the history of HBCUs predate the historically black colleges as we know it. If we're talking about the history of historically black colleges or black education, we have to go back to Africa. Education among African people did not start with Europeans. We had universities in ancient Kemet. We had the University of Sankora and dozens of other universities in the empires of Mali and Songhai. We had other universities in various African nations. And also when we're talking about indigenous knowledge, indigenous education. And so education is not just about getting a degree. Education is about how a group of people survive. And every group of people have their own form of education. But African people, once we were kidnapped and brought to the Americas by the hand of Europeans, we and subject to this harsh form of human bondage. There was an educational process there also. The educational process on the slave plantations in which our people were held under a totalitarian dictatorship was secret. It was underground. But we had education. We now know that at least 10% of all enslaved Africans could read. And if it was against the law for them to read, how were they reading? It was secret. It was underground. And that is the origins of our educational system in this country. It emerged out of a total dictatorship that was pushed on us that we call slavery. I like to call it what it is. It's totalitarian dictatorship. And I know a lot of people are not used to those type of terms, but I encourage people to look up what that means, totalitarian dictatorship, in which we were under the hands of European Americans that we sometimes call white. So when we talk about the education of black people or the origins of black colleges, we have to begin there. Also, during the period of dictatorship or what we call slavery, we had a plethora of black schools that did emerge. And most of these schools emerged out of the black church movement. I live in Delaware. Some of the oldest black independent churches started right here in Delaware, and we know about Richard Allen in Philadelphia. So with these black churches, the issue with the black church was also an issue, the emergence of self-government. The emergence of the black church was an emergence of self-government, that black people said that they wanted to govern themselves in their religious beliefs. And, and out of this also emerged the black school movement. So every church also had a black school, right? Independent black schools. Many of these schools operated independently of European control, like the black church did. And so out of that, that was the creation of the black colleges. Now, some of these black colleges, right before slavery, had support of European Americans, particularly that of the abolitionist movement. And their main issue was that they knew that they couldn't control African people in the United States, but at least they wanted to control how they were thinking.
Right.
Because we were naturally, like any group of self-determined people, wanted freedom. And so they wanted to control it. And so right before the Civil War, I think we had about 5 or 6 independent black schools. I mentioned this in my article, How Black Colleges Are Turning White, the ethnic cleansing of historically black colleges in the age of Obama. And anybody can Google it. Also, right after the Civil War, when the Union forces defeated the South, we see that there were a plethora of black colleges that emerged right after the Civil War. And these schools were set up by black people without European control. In fact, when the northern missionaries came into the South, they realized that most African Americans were self-determined. They had already started their own schools. They thought they were coming to civilize a group of backwards people. No. We had our own schools. We had our own curriculums. We had black teachers doing it. And they were shocked. According to James Anderson in his book, The Education of Blacks in the South, he argued that there were probably more than 500 independent black schools in the South. Led to the emergence of the historically black college movement. It grew out of our struggle. And we must remember many of these schools were set up by former African American Civil War veterans who fought to free themselves. A lot of people say Abraham Lincoln freed us. Well, he didn't free anybody. We know that the Emancipation Proclamation only freed those people who were engaged, who were in the South. But he didn't free anybody. The Emancipation Proclamation did not free anybody in territories where the Northern Union had control over. It's black people freed themselves. They fought. They left plantations. And this is a part of history that is totally ignored. And so in an effort to control how we were thinking, since we had our own schools, the federal government, and we didn't want to go back to those plantations, and why would we? After working for several hundred years for free, why would you want to go back? Most people emerging from enslavement wanted to go back to Africa. And so there was a movement there. But they needed free labor. Who was going to rebuild the war-torn economy of the South? Right? And so since black people weren't doing it, they were talking about self-determination. They decided to take control of the educational institution with the Freedmen's Bureau. And, this goes into a long discussion. I know we don't have a lot of time, but and from there, since black people still, they didn't agree with it. They said they were going to do their own thing. And they decided to do an experiment, right, at Hampton University. And Booker T. Washington emerged as one of the top spokesperson for this new type of schooling of black people being controlled. But remember, if they needed a spokesperson for a new type of schooling, meaning that black people should constantly be under the authority of European Americans, that means that the vast majority of African people in this country did not agree with this. And there was a lot of opposition to Booker T. Washington and his movement, which is not talked about. There's a large opposition. And I even cite in my article that Booker T. Washington, while he was at Hampton University, the entrance exam for getting into Hampton University was none other than sweeping the floor. So that tells you the type of education that European Americans wanted. They wanted black people to be subservient to European ideals and European belief systems. They didn't want black people thinking independently because they saw it as a threat. And it is a threat when you look at it like that. And so this is the origins. Right before around 1900, W.E.B. Du Bois did a report on the the black college school movement. Around 1910, there were more than 220 historically black colleges. And guess what? They were not all created, as a lot of people think, by Europeans. No. These schools came about by our own efforts to educate our own people to be self-determined, right? But that was a issue. It was a major issue for the South because the South did not want it, and obviously the North did not want it. And so the land grant programs that came out of the Merrill Grant of 1890s came out in an effort to take control of black education. But black people fought it. They fought it. And even W.E.B. Du Bois in the 1930s, after he left the NAACP, he fought the European takeover of Fisk. He waged a 10-year battle and defeated Fisk. He organized the alumni because the corporations had taken over Fisk University, which was the school that he graduated from. And he waged an intellectual war against it because the corporations, those philanthropist organizations that were controlled by the wealthiest men of the world, controlled the curriculum. And they've always been afraid of how black people think because these institutions have created people like Du Bois, Ida B. Wells, people like Jesse Jackson, Dr. King. This is coming out of the black college, right? The civil rights movement was a movement that came out of the black middle class intellectual group in the South. And without that, you didn't have HBC. You didn't have a civil rights movement, right? And even the Black Power movement that emerged out of the black college tradition. The anti-colonial movement came out of the historically black college tradition. That is what created Kwame Nkrumah, who set up the Africa's first Pan-Africanist government.
That's right, Lincoln University.
That is what created George Patmore, who was the intellectual behind this, right? So that is what created Ezekwe in Nigeria in the beginning. So these things are not discussed. So in my article, I was looking at why is there an attack on these black colleges? Why now? And that's what I was able to see, that basically historically black colleges, as they are, is a threat to U.S. national security. And I know that may sound crazy to some people, but it's not. Because I'm a product of historically black colleges. You see, I wouldn't be who I am, the way that I think, had not were not black professors there. They brought in Dr. Clark. I didn't know who Dr. Clark was until I went to undergrad at Southern University. I didn't know who Stokely Carmichael was until they brought him to Southern University. I had never met Dr. Ben. I didn't know who he was. And so you had this tremendous rich history of resistance. These colleges were teaching our people how to resist white supremacy. And we have the skill set to do that. And without that, you can't resist. Right. You see, you're subject to constant arrest and penitentiary. You're subject to all the histories that have been perpetrated against African people in this country. So what they have devised, starting with George Bush the second in the right after he took over during his first election as United States president, was how do we take control of this education to prevent another civil rights and black power movement? It's coming out of the black college tradition because of the professors. It was the professors that pushed the young students at North Carolina A&T. It was the professors that pushed the young students at Bennett College. It was the professors that pushed the young Dr. Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement in Alabama at Alabama A&M. This is a subject that is rarely talked about. And I mean, I can tell you quite vividly when I was an undergrad student at Southern University, we were told all the time that we had to be better. That we had to be better. It wasn't enough for mediocrity. That because the system that we were going up against would force us to be better. Your I's had to be dotted. Your T's had to be crossed. I never forget one professor at Southern University. He was a political science professor. He said, if some of you guys are going to be airline pilots, you better learn how to flip that airline. If the white people are just flying it regularly, you better learn how to do somersaults. This is the type of education we were given. And we were constantly encouraged to fight the powers that be for our basic citizenship, our basic constitutional rights. And so what I saw when I was teaching, when I did my PhD at Howard, another historically black college, I wrote my doctoral dissertation on the Garvey movement in Louisiana. And everybody at Howard, I never forget, most of the young people at Howard were finishing their PhDs. They just talked about going to all the mainstream white universities to teach. That wasn't my case. I said, I want to start off and give back to who gave birth to my intellectual pursuit, and that was the black college tradition. So I taught in 2005. I went to Elizabeth City State University, and it's a historically black college in North Carolina, created in 1891, I believe. And I noticed when I got there weren't that many African American professors, and I noticed all these crazy things going on because I attended Southern University in Baton Rouge. I attended Texas Southern University in Houston, and I did my PhD at Howard. So I had this black college experience. I knew what a black college was, but I noticed that Elizabeth City State, there weren't that many black professors, and there was an intellectual assault against the African American students. So the non-African American faculty were teaching a lot of false history and sociology and psychology. And I was like, wow, what is this? What is this going on? So I began to do the research. And then when I came to Delaware State University in Dover, which is a historically black college, I saw the same thing, that there were very few African American professors, the same type of teaching. In fact, I had one white professor that walked into my office during the first month of my first semester and plainly told me that I was too black, that my history classes were too black. And that if I didn't tone down the way that I was lecturing, I'm teaching African American history, right? But it was too black. He said, and it was, and he said the one or two white students in the class didn't like it. I said, well, what didn't they like? They didn't like us talking about slavery and the European participation and the brutality. That's history. It's in our textbook, But this is what was going on at Delaware State. So I said, let me start back this research. And this is what led me to do this research on how black colleges are turning white, the ethnic cleansing of HBCUs in the age of Obama.
Thank you. I appreciate that historical overview that you gave, because I think it's particularly instructive. And then as we also know, prior to Brown versus Board of Education on the secondary level, there was no less than 100 all black boarding schools throughout the U.S., mainly in the South. And now today in 2013, there's simply 4 predominantly black boarding schools in the U.S. And so it's that continued assault. And as you know, with the passing of Brown versus Board of Education, that was like, yeah, you can integrate into our white school system, but you can't bring in your black mores and value systems, that you had prior to this. So therefore, you're going to have to accept, your children being taught about our heroes and sheroes, despite the fact that most of white America's heroes and sheroes, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, were slave owners. You know what I'm saying? They owned, African people as shadow man, as property. And that to me, that's the essence of that's at the essence of white supremacy. That it forces people of color to be subjugated and to have to assimilate to a system that is completely against their best interests. And so with that being said, you just mentioned Delaware State. I want to know, because in a bit I'm going to show the video of what happened to you at Delaware State, but I'd like for you to tell our viewers and our listeners what happened to you at Delaware State. You were standing up, standing on the side of students, which I think is completely admirable in this age of academic, the academic bourgeoisie, that just love to just go out there and they're just simply thinking about tenure and so forth. You were thinking about your students, what was in the best interest of your students, and you were standing on their side, and you were summarily assaulted and arrested. Can you tell us the story about that?
Yes, well, even before that, after I wrote the article on how black colleges are turning white, the university took an extremely adverse. The attacks from the administration was just unbearable for the most part, and but the students witnessed many of these attacks, and so a lot of the student organizations would constantly invite me to speak at their organizations about what was happening at Delaware State. And I would lecture on the history of black colleges, what they were about, and why they are important. And the university did not like that. They did not like it, and because they were going through an ethnic cleansing. And so the students noticed that there were fewer African American professors there. I think right now the African American faculty is less than like 20%, with a great deal of them being at retirement age. And so what we're looking at potentially is that the African American faculty at Delaware State University and other schools is moving into an area where it will probably be less than 2 to 3% in about 3 or 4 years, sort of to West Virginia State and Bluefield State University, which are historically black colleges, but there are no black people there. And they get millions of dollars of federal and state aid for black people without black people being at the school. That's corruption, all right? That's major corruption. And so the students were witnessing this, and they invited me to several meetings, and they made a decision that they wanted to go to the Board of Trustee meeting. I was also lecturing on lynchings in December of 2012, actually February 2012. People from the community of Dover, the black community, approached me with flyers that depicted black men hanging from trees. And, I just couldn't believe it. And I started to investigate it. And when I investigated it, I went into the community and asked people, and they said, yeah, these flyers have been circulating throughout the community saying that they were going to lynch black people. So I went back to the university, and during the period of the origins of the civil rights movement, I started lecturing on lynchings and Emmett Till, and I used the flyer that was circulating around the black community as a primary source to show students that these things are still going on. The students, quite naturally, like any group of young people, were outraged and didn't understand, and they had a rally one day before the March 1st protest, and I didn't know about this rally. They didn't tell me about it, and later on they told me, and I went out and I saw it, and I told them, hey, you have a right to rally, and but the rally was broken up by the police department at Delaware State University, and then they decided that they were going to go to the board of trustees to talk about the ethnic cleansing of black colleges, black professors, and the lynchings. And so obviously the powers to be at Delaware State University, and even possibly some of the most powerful people in state government didn't want a bunch of black students doing this. Now, in 2010, the white students at Delaware State University had a similar protest, the white equestrian team, where they rode their horses throughout the campus and protested the fact that the university was going to shut down the equestrian team. Of course, the equestrian team is a majority white females, and they had a major protest in front of the administration building, along with faculty who spoke out. I know because I was there. I watched the entire event, and some of those students were my students. In fact, they came to me first. These European American girls, and said, "Dr. Issa, you're the activist professor. Do you support?" I said, "Sure. I support any students who feel that their rights are being violated. You have a right to protest. I protested in college and in high school." And so, but no one was arrested. But when you had this group of black professors, black students, and I did support the students, I was out there. I wasn't violent in any way. I was peaceful. And even the police officers admitted in our hearing that they had no probable cause to even arrest me. But still, they're still prosecuting me. And so that's what happened. I'm not sure which video that you're showing. Some of the videos have been tampered and doctored. So, but show it. It will allow people to see what's going on here in Delaware State.
Bust him out. Bust him out.
How is this happening on the black guy?
I'm now facing more than 2 years in prison. I was lost my job. I have a wife and 5 children, and I've incurred a tremendous amount of legal expenses in fighting this case, and I'm still fighting these lynchings because since that flyer was put out, a young man named Lorenzo Clark, was found hanging from a tree at a park that I frequent every day after I was arrested and banned from the university. And and that young man was my former barber. And the state ruled it a suicide. And then we later found out during the investigation that there was another young man, a college student at a college at Wesley College, who they said was also found hanging from a tree. And then, then in September of 2012, a young man named Henry Fordham escaped a lynching. And so, in which it's just crazy. And so we have mass murderers running around Delaware, hanging black people on trees, and the NAACP, the Attorney General who's prosecuting me, Mr. Bo Biden, who's the Vice President of the United States' son, refused to investigate. And we really think that's possibly one of the reasons why they're still trying to put me in jail. I'm facing 2 years in prison because I refuse to shut up about the lynchings. And they are lynchings. They're not suicides, although the state is ruling them suicides because they don't want the world to know that these things are still going on, particularly in the vice president's back home state. And maybe that's one reason why your face on this video is not showing up. And hopefully we can talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Yeah, we try to start this interview, and for some reason, it's never happened before. And we tried doing try to troubleshoot about 4 or 5 times before we actually said what, let's F it, let's go ahead and do it. And if it's only your face, that's fine, because your story is the most important thing. But I've never had that happen before, where I could not get the video segment to interface with your Skype, and so my video won't interface with your Skype, and so therefore the apparatus I use can only record your face on this video. But it's completely crazy. And you were speaking about COINTELPRO before, and you said Delaware has one of the most repressive COINTELPRO policies.
Oh yes, yes they do. I don't know. It's echoing. Do you hear the echo?
No, not on my end.
Oh, okay. I'll keep talking then. Yes, they do. Remember, this is the vice president's home state. Delaware also has the largest percentage-wise of African American men who are incarcerated. 70% of all African Americans who are 70% of all incarcerated people in Delaware are African Americans. It's the highest in the country, for people to know this. So this is what we're dealing with. There's a lot of repressive. Black people are constantly repressed here. They just banned hangings not too long ago, maybe I think about 15 years ago, where they would hang prisoners as a punishment of the death penalty. They just banned that like 20, 30 years ago. Delaware is also the last state in the United States to ratify the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. A lot of people thought it was Mississippi. Yeah, Mississippi for the 13th Amendment. But Delaware did not ratify the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment until 1904. And so this is the historical context that we're dealing with. I didn't know this. There's a lot of fear and terror here, a lot of repressiveness here. People are extremely fearful. So since I'm not here, and I come out of this tradition of resisting, this is part of my education, coming out of the historically black college tradition. And this is why I wrote this article, because they don't want our people to resist. When I was doing the investigation of the lynchings, many of the people said that they did not know what a lynching was. So if you don't know what a lynching is, then you can lynch people. This is the perfect place to lynch a person, because it's not in the educational system. And so even if you go to the War on the Horizon videos, that they were courageous enough to come down and video these people, they even say, we didn't know what a lynching was before Dr. Issa told us. Even one of the families It's just really sad. But this is what we're dealing with in 2012 in the age of the so-called first black president. Um, and what we're seeing is our ability to resist. And it's not just with black colleges, it's also with white colleges too, where black people go. Because now in the Supreme Court, there's a case called Fisher versus the United States, where the Supreme Court is going to rule any day from now, and I'm certain they're going to end affirmative action in higher education. That means since they're now trying to cleanse black college of black people, they're also going to have rules in place. The Supreme Court is going to say that there's no need for affirmative action. So 90% of all African Americans that go to traditionally white colleges in this country are only there because of affirmative action. We don't like to admit that, but that's the truth. And so with that taken away, then we're going to see more African Americans who could be trained properly to survive in this society in the prisons. And this is being done right now in our face. And so I think we have some major problems. Even at the University of Maryland, I'm told that they're now trying to take the African American Student Center away. But they're doing this all over the country. At Cornell University, the Black Studies program has basically been taken away. At Temple University, they're having a protest next week about the Black Studies program. So what they're attacking is the intellectual institutions that train our people how to resist, how to survive. That's education first. Education is not about getting a job. If you are trained how to resist and survive, you can create your own jobs. And so they're taking that away from us, and through the help of the federal government. And so this is what we're dealing with.
Right. And since you brought up, I mean, part of the title within the article that you wrote has the word of somebody's name by the name of Obama, and we know that's Barack Obama, the first so-called black president of the United States of America. And so I wanted to, if you can kind of expound upon what you talked about within that article when it comes to black misleadership, because number one, when these kind of things happen, you would think that NAACP, the Urban League, they would be at the forefront in terms of providing some insulation around you to protect you and to being out front, because protecting individuals like yourself is bigger than an individual. When you protect an individual like yourself, then in essence you're safeguarding black education as we know it, HBCUs, because as you have also said before, that the HBCUs, they're hiring more and more white professors that have the politics of a neoliberal, the politics of a conservative, and they don't want to have the classrooms in terms of the rhetoric and the information that is bantered about in the classroom. They don't want it to have it, quote unquote, too black. And so the misleadership within the NAACP, the same organization that helped, that succumbed to pressure and booted out the likes of Du Bois and Ida B. Wells, that same NAACP is nowhere to be found in terms of helping you out. Black leaders are not knocking down the door of Delaware State saying, you must end this case and you must reinstate, Dr. Jahi Issa. Can you talk about black leadership or black misleadership, which I think is a better term, in America today? And we could start with Obama and move on back, because I think it's very telling that Obama, you mentioned with Obama how the initiatives that are coming out of his White House are supporting a corporate takeover. What do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean is that if people look at the article, I give several examples. I don't just talk about it. I give footnotes. If you go to the Black Agenda Report and just Google the article, how black colleges are turning white, I show how this is being done. I even met with the White House advisor on HBCU, Mr. John Sullivan, Dr. John Sullivan, who's now at Morehouse. He's the president of Morehouse, and he asked me to meet with him, and I did at his office in D.C., and then I grilled him on what's going on with these black colleges, and I asked him, in 15 to 20 years, will there be black colleges with black people in them? And he wouldn't answer the question. He refused to answer. This is President Barack Hussein's hand-picked man for black colleges for the United States. He refused to ask the question. I went on national radio and cited verbatim what he refused to say. And so what we're looking at is genocide. This is genocide, and we need to bring this up to the United Nations. This is pure genocide, what is happening to us. They only want us in the prisons, and that is clear by how they're treating me. And what's interesting about this is the vice president's state, and his son is prosecuting me on fraudulent, trumped-up charges because of my activism on black colleges and my activism against what is happening all over this country, lynching. So I did go to the NAACP, no response. We went to them several times. I went to the Urban League, no response. We contacted the SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, no response. They're all on the corporate payroll, and so they don't care because they're paid. They're getting paid not to say anything. I went to almost every traditional black organization that you can think of, no response. They're all some of the largest black churches in the country, no response. I went to even Nation of Islam, Minister Farrakhan's advisors. They refused to contact me. So these are very serious issues, and it seems as though all the organizations that would have traditionally said something because they feel that it may embarrass the president, they are now in cahoots in their own annihilation, because that's what we're looking at. We're looking at the potential annihilation as a group of people as they are. And Du Bois warned of this. In an article in 1963, I think, at Johnson C. Smith, is an article that Du Bois wrote, his last one before he left this country and died in Ghana. It's called Whither, Why, or Now. And he said that he will not, he did not spend his life fighting to not have black people, to not have black colleges and black teachers, in which he said that in 30 years we're going to witness the end of black people as we see it. And he blamed the traditional civil rights movement leaders for this. He said, you guys are making a mistake. I want the young people who are listening to this, Google Du Bois's article, Whither, Why, or Now, and you will read it. You will see what he said. And so what we are witnessing is the end of who we are as a people. And everybody is in cahoots with it. Everyone. All the black traditional, Jesse Jackson, you name it, Al Sharpton, I went to them. Right. They turned me away. They know me personally. These are not, people that I don't know. I know these people. They all turned me away. Jesse Jackson's people, Al Sharpton's people. I know Al Sharpton personal, first name. You name it. I went to some of the top black radio show hosts, Joe Madison. All of them, they all said we can't deal with this because it's going to hurt the president. So what they have done is sacrifice their children and their grandchildren lives for personal gain. And this is sad. Even what's happening at University of Maryland, the attempt is to take away our ability to resist and remember. That's the attempt. That's what's happening at Delaware State University. So it's not just an attack on me, but it's an attack on the group.
That's right.
You see? And this is what people have to understand. It's not, I never took this personally, although it's affected my wife and my children personally. But I understand that this is not about me. It's about the ideals that I present, and the ideals came out of our tradition of resistance. They're not my ideals; they are the group's ideals. And so, as it stands now, we're in major trouble for our children and our children's children in the next 20 years. The goal now is in order to compete with the rising Asian tigers like China and India and Turkey and now Brazil, the United States needs free labor. The only way they're going to get that free labor is to put us back in prison. The 13th Amendment states that there's a clause in the 13th Amendment that says that if you go to prison, you're a slave, right? And so they can keep us in prison, then they can compete with the rest of the world. And so this is what this is about. And then, too, they see us as a threat. They've always seen us as a threat since they first brought us here. But Europeans brought us here. We didn't ask to come. They brought us here. And they don't want us to remind them of this. You see? And so once they take people like me out of educational systems, then I can't train young people how to resist. This is coming from the European elite. This is what it is. And I've been the only one in the country that's been willing to talk about it because I'm concerned about my children and my children's children and the children that they socialize with. I'm concerned about their future. And since they see someone like me who's passionate, who can't be corrupted and bought off, right, they have to marginalize me. And this is what they've done.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I want to say that anyone that's listening right now, you know, he laid it out, and Dr. Issa could not be more spot on. You know, so-called black leadership in this country, the mainstream black leadership, the Sharptons, and the like, they have sold their souls, and sold out, their people, sold out black people to promote the political career of somebody named Barack Obama, who could not give a damn about black people as a whole. I mean, for God's sakes, this same man, a brown-faced president, waged war on the continent of Africa and bombed Libya into the Stone Age. And now they're in the midst of a civil war started, financed by the Pentagon, the White House, the State Department, and so forth. And so I'm hoping people that listen right now, it's going to take a grassroots effort. This is a grassroots effort for us as an African community, as a black community, to come together and support one of our own. Because as Dr. Issa said, that it's not about him, but targeting him means that they by targeting him and making sure that he stays suppressed, then what they're doing in essence is suppressing all of us. They're suppressing black education, African education. They're suppressing progressive black education. And so that's why we have to come together and we have to support our own. And so I'm hoping that folks that are listening right now will do what they can to find out how to get involved, and to how to support Dr. Issa. If you're somewhere in this country and you might be a professor or a dean or something like that, I want you to look into contacting this man and bringing him to your campus, if not for a lecture, but probably more importantly to employ him as a professor. These are the kind of professors we need in classrooms across the United States of America. These are the kind of professors and the kind of information and rhetoric that we need there. And it benefits everybody. As he said before, the white students in his classrooms, the white equestrian team, they went to him because they saw him as an activist. So they themselves benefited from the rhetoric and the information that he was talking about. So it in a civilized country, black education benefits everybody. It benefits everybody. But first and foremost, yes, it benefits black students. But after that, it benefits so-called majority students, white students, and serves as progressive intervention to prevent them from adopting the same white supremacist ideologies as their parents and their grandparents. And so therefore, helping these white students to move closer to humanity, which is not where, much of white society is, because this country has embraced institutional racism and white supremacy, subjecting, people of color to just inhumane systems and policies such as the prison industrial complex, the prison system, and so forth. So with that being said, Dr. Issa, as I've just put that appeal out to folks, what is the best way people can contact you? Because I want people to be able to contact you. You have endured and have been hurt by just a high amount of legal fees. It has broken your bank account to have to fight these individuals to clear your name and to also to keep your freedom, because as you said before, they're trying to put you behind bars for 2 years. How can people get involved? How can people get a hold of you to support you, if not monetarily, otherwise?
Well, you can email me at my website for those. We have a legal defense fund. It's called. You can go to HBCUinstitute.org. That's HBCUinstitute.org. And you can click on it and make a donation to our legal defense fund. And that's how I've been able to hire an attorney and pay for some of my legal fees, which are just astronomical. A lot of the stuff I've had to do to myself because of lack of funding. Also, if they want to email me, they can do so at jahissa65.com. Like if I got 100 people to donate $10, that will help out tremendously with my legal fees. But before we leave, I want to just read this article, a brief description of what Du Bois said in 1960 at Johnson C. Smith in Whither, Why, Now, and Why. He wrote, What I have been fighting for and am still fighting for is the possibility of black folk and their cultural patterns existing in America without discrimination and on terms of equality. This brings up a number of difficult problems which we have to solve and make a definite preparation for such solutions. Take, for instance, the current problem of education of our children. By the law of the land today, they should be admitted into the public schools. If and when they are admitted to these schools, certain things will inevitably follow. Negro teachers will become rare, and many cases will disappear. Negro children will be instructed in the public schools and taught under unpleasant, if not discouraging circumstances. Even more largely than today, they will fall out of school, cease to enter high school, and fewer will go to college. Theoretically, Negro universities will disappear. Negro history will be taught less or not at all, and as in so many cases in the past, Negroes will remember their white or Indian ancestors and quite forget their Negro forebears. He said this in 1960. He was prophetic. This is exactly what's happening. The full article can be found online. You just have to type in Whither, Now, and Why. This was his last speech before he left the United States and moved to Ghana and died in Ghana. And they worship him as a national hero in the country of Ghana. So this is where we're at. 50 years later, he wrote this article. This is where we are. And so he really goes into what's really going on now. He was being prophetic. He saw it. And so this is what I have decided to take up what he said. As an intellectual, I must do that. That's what produced me. And it would be nice if I had the financial support of my peers. We've gone to all the black organizations for help, but none of them have helped. And so it's a very difficult fight if we don't have the support of our people. And but I'm willing to go to any campus and speak And if anybody brought me up, Howard University, their students for against mass incarceration, they brought me up in November of last year, I think, and more than 200 people packed the auditorium to hear me speak, and they were blown away.
Right.
And in fact, even after that speech, someone basically threatened my life, which it was just amazing.
Wow.
That the levels of in which this government is going through. But I understand to try to prevent these ideas. These are the ideas. It's not me personally, but they know that I represent the ideals, and I can't be bought off. I come from mainstream Black America. I didn't come from the ivory towers of Black America. I came from mainstream, average Black folk who love being Black. Right, and loving being Black means that you love humanity.
That's right.
And so, my government has a problem with that now, as they seek to control the resources in Africa. So they most definitely don't need a young group of Black people at Black college being taught that they're African, being taught their history of Africa, because how can they control the resources in Africa? And once Africa becomes totally under European control, then that's really it for us as a group. Because the heartbeat of Black America is nationalism and the remembrance of Africa, and they understand this. And so these are the major obstacles that we are facing. These are the obstacles that I am facing.
Right. Well, I want to thank you for your time, and I want to just say one more time to folks that are listening, as he said, once again, if you are a humanity-loving human being, Black, white, Asian, indigenous, Latino, or other, if you are a humanity-loving human being, then I would really encourage you to get in contact with Brother Dr. Jahi Issa and find out, how you can, support him, even if it's just moral support, because this kind of education that he's talking about benefits everybody. It benefits Black students, it benefits white students, it benefits Latino students, it benefits everyone, and especially, Black students. But as I said before, as you can see, white students on his campus also came to him for consolement when they were facing their equestrian team being dismantled, and went to him because of his activist work. They saw that, and that goes along the line with this country's history. Black people have always been at the forefront of every major movement, until now, where we see this Trojan horse, or Barack Obama, has been used very cleverly by the white liberal establishment within the Democratic Party to really advance these imperialist wars by putting a blackface at the helm of them, and it shows you, if you have a whole bunch of Africans in America that did not get out in mass and demand an end to that war in Libya, as well as definitely the wars with our brothers and sisters are facing in Afghanistan and Pakistan. It's very telling. So we need to get back in line with our humanity. This is where education can play a key role, in individuals like Jahi Issa and the long legacy of progressive Black leadership on the campuses of these HBCUs is so important. So that's Brother Dr. Jahi Issa. I'm Solomon Kamajan. This is Critical Insight in Your World News. And since we're talking about HBCUs and one of the products of HBCUs, in the words of the late, great Osage for Kwame Nkrumah, forward ever, backward never. Thank you, brother, for spending time tonight on Your World News.
All right, thank you.
I got a letter from the government the other day. I opened and read it and burned that. Man, the way that I live don't concern that. Man, we gon' have to settle this another way. A letter from the government the other day. I opened and read it and burned that. Man, the way that I live don't concern that. Man, we gon' have to settle this another way.
Movement, music, moving to it. Put a fist up, prove it to us. This is much more than music to us. This is beauty and strife. And if you know about the music, then you know about life. This is movement, music, moving to it. Put a fist up, prove it to us. This is